The single mom waitress got laughed at. The Mafia Boss reserved all 36 tables. The rain in Pioneer Bay doesn't just fall, it attacks. It's a cold, sideways Seattle assault, and tonight, it was winning. I'm Lila Moreno. I'm 27 years old, which feels like 47 in waitress years. My life is a precise, frantic triangle between the Salt and Cedar Bistro at night, the Bubble Beacon Laundry by day, and the tiny one-bedroom apartment I share with my son, Theo. Theo is 6. He's the reason I do the triangle. He's the reason I'm still standing. The 8 o'clock rush was over, leaving only the dregs. The Salt and Cedar aimed for rustic upscale, which meant exposed brick, filament bulbs, and prices that made mechanics and fishermen scoff. My uniform, a gray linen apron over a white button-down, was clean, but the cuffs were fraying, and the apron had a stubborn shadow of a wine stain that no amount of bleach from the laundromat could kill. Tonight, the bad weather had dragged in table 7. They were micro-influencers. A term I'd learned meant they were loud, demanding, and tipped in exposure. 3 of them, 2 women and a man, with a blindingly bright ring light set up on their table, filming everything. Their voices cut through the restaurant's quiet jazz. Okay, guys, so we are living for this vibe, but the service is a little vintage, one of them said, aiming the phone right at me as I approached. I forced the smile. It felt like cracking plaster. Can I get you anything else? Yeah, the man squinted at my chest. Is that, like, part of the uniform, the stain? His companions laughed, a sharp, artificial sound. I felt the heat rise in my neck. It's a busy night, sir. The wine. Right, no. He waved a dismissive hand. We actually ordered the charred octopus appetizer, like 10 minutes ago, but we're canceling it. The vibe is just off now. I knew for a fact they had ordered it less than 2 minutes ago. I also knew it was the most expensive appetizer we had. This was a game. They'd order, film themselves ordering, and then cancel, or complain, or both. It was all content. I just nodded, my notepad steady. Of course, I'll have that voided. As I walked away, I heard him whisper loudly to the camera, C0 personality, and that uniform is tragic. Salt and Cedar. You can do better. The check was already on their table. When they finally left, flapping their coats and complaining about the rain, I went to clear the plates. On a $60 tab, they had left exactly nothing. Not a dime. Just a smudge of lipstick on a napkin. I was scraping plates when the new manager, Kellen Price, cornered me by the POS system. Kellen was all slicked back hair, tight shirts, and toxic positivity. He loved branding and engagement. He hated me. Lila, he hissed, smiling so the nearby tables couldn't see his teeth. What happened with table 7? They looked miserable. They canceled their big item last minute and were unhappy with everything, I guess. They tagged the restaurant, Kellen said, his phone already in his hand. They said the service was tragic. That's your table. Lila, that's your tag. Kellen, they were filming me. They insulted my uniform. I don't care if they insulted your mother. Your job is to absorb it. You are here to enhance the vibe, not poison it. We're an experience, not a diner. He straightened his lapel. You keep making my floor look bad. I'm cutting your hours. You can't pay your rent with the Tuesday day shift. Fix your attitude. He walked away, leaving me staring at the screen, the order for charred octopus still flashing red before I voided it. Cutting my hours wasn't a threat. It was a death sentence. Theo's preschool wasn't free. The swinging door to the kitchen burst open, and a hand grabbed my arm. Juniper Park. June, our bar back, pulled me through. June was small, fast, and had a tattoo of a wasp on her neck. She shoved me behind the stainless steel wall of the dish pit, the roar of the steamer covering us. Hey, don't, she commanded. I hadn't even realized the tears were coming. I swiped at my eye, angry. He's cutting my hours because I got stiffed. He's an idiot who cares about Instagram, June said, her voice low and fast. But you can't cry out there. That's what they want. They want the footage of the crying waitress. It's blood in the water. You go back out. You hold your head up, and you don't give them the satisfaction. You hear me? I took a deep, shuddering breath that smelled like bleach and old fry oil. I nodded. Yeah, I hear you. Good. She shoved a clean, folded rag into my hand. Wipe your face. Table 12 needs water. I pushed back through the door. My spine felt a little stiffer. I could do this. I scanned my section. Table 12 needing water, table 9 finishing dessert, and him. In the very back, at the worst table in the house. Table 36, jammed by the fire exit, a man sat alone. I hadn't really noticed him before. He wasn't loud. He wasn't filming. He'd been there for an hour, nursing a single glass of whiskey and reading a physical newspaper. He wore an ash-gray wool coat, impeccably tailored, draped over the back of his chair despite the warmth of the bistro. He looked out of place, like a block of granite in a sandbox. He hadn't ordered anything complicated, just the whiskey and a steak, rare, and he hadn't complained. He hadn't asked for anything. He was just watching. When I dropped off his check, our eyes had met for a second. His were dark, calm, and had a coldness that went right through my apron. It wasn't unkind. It was just empty, like steel. I grabbed the water pitcher and headed for table 12, forcing the smile back onto my face. I was just passing the influencer table's wreckage when the man from that group, who I thought had left, reappeared. Oh, forgot my charger, he said, moving toward the table. He was lying. I saw him move, a deliberate jut of his hip as I passed with my heavy tray of water glasses. He was trying to knock it out of my hands. He wanted the finale for his live stream. I saw it coming. Years of balancing hot soup and heavy trays for Theo quickened my reflexes. I pivoted, hiking the tray up, the glasses rattling but holding steady, not a drop spilled. His smile faltered. He hadn't gotten his shot. But Kellen had seen it, and Kellen saw his chance. "Lila, watch out!" Kellen shouted, rushing forward with a fake, helpful expression. He didn't grab the tray. He grabbed my arm. His hand slipped, and he slammed his forearm into the side of the tray. This time, I couldn't save it. The sound of 3 heavy water glasses shattering on the hardwood floor was like a gunshot. Ice and water sprayed my legs, soaking my shoes. The influencer's phone snapped right back to me, the ring light blinding. "Oh my God," the woman shrieked, delighted. "It's everywhere!" Kellen rounded on me, his face crimson with managerial rage. "What is wrong with you tonight, Moreno? This is coming out of your check-awas." I was frozen, staring at the broken glass. "Well, don't just stand there," Kellen snapped. "Get on your knees, clean it up, now." The phone was zoomed in on my face. I could feel the humiliation burning, hotter than the dish pit. I knelt, my hands shaking as I reached for the larger pieces of glass, my reflection staring back at me from a puddle on the floor. The influencers were laughing. A shadow fell over me. I looked up. The man in the ash-gray coat was standing over the table, and he was taller than I thought, and he wasn't looking at Kellen, and he wasn't looking at the influencers. He was looking at the broken glass. Then, very slowly, he moved his gaze to Kellen. He said nothing. The air around the table went from loud to dead silent. The man looked at the phone, and the guy holding it actually lowered it, the ring light pointing at the floor. The man reached into his coat. He pulled out a wallet. Not a wallet, really, a card holder. He slid out a single card, matte black, heavy, with no numbers, just a name embossed on it. He placed it on the influencer's table, next to the lipstick-stained napkin. Then he placed a small, folded note beside it. He adjusted his cuff. He looked at me, still on my knees, just a glance, and then he walked out of the restaurant, the bell over the door jingling softly as he disappeared into the rain. The silence held for a beat. "Weirdo," the influencer guy muttered, but he didn't raise his phone. Kellen, puffing himself up, marched over and snatched the card and the note. He clearly expected a complaint. He unfolded the note. I watched his face. I'd seen Kellen angry. I'd seen him smug. I'd seen him fake charming. I'd never seen him scared. His face went completely white. His hands were shaking. He read the note again. "Get up, Lila," he whispered, not looking at me. "Just get back to the kitchen." When the last of the customers had finally gone and I was wiping down the espresso machine, the mood in the bistro was bizarre. Kellen had locked himself in his office. "What was on that note?" June asked, polishing glasses. "Probably a threat to sue. God, I hope he sues," I said, my feet aching, my socks still wet. "Who was that guy?" "No idea, just quiet." The kitchen staff was buzzing. "Did you see Kellen's face? That guy looked like money. It's probably a prank." Maritza, the head chef, called out, "Some tech bro trying to be mysterious. Who books 36 tables on a weekday?" Lila sighed. It was just a joke. A weird, cruel, quiet joke at the end of a weird, cruel, loud night. It was time to go home. Then the landline in the manager's office rang. It was an old, heavy phone, and its ring was loud in the empty restaurant. We all froze. Kellen never got calls this late. We heard his muffled voice through the door. Then it got louder. Yes, sir, I understand." A pause. "The deposit already." Another longer pause. We heard Kellen swallow. "Yes, sir, all 36 tables. The staff will be here, and—" "Yes, sir, I understand. I will not be—" The door opened. Kellen was holding the phone receiver, his knuckles white. He looked pale, almost green. He didn't look at me. He looked through me. "Maritza," he said, his voice cracking. "The bank just confirmed the wire. A 6-figure deposit. We're booked out tomorrow, all 36 tables. For him." The 6-figure deposit didn't stop the alarm from screaming at 6 a.m. Money on a different planet doesn't pay the rent on this one. My morning started the same way it always did in the damp Seattle dark, pulling Theo out of bed. He's 6. All warm limbs and sleepy protests. I got him dressed, forced half a piece of toast into his mouth, and checked his backpack for the permission slip I'd forgotten to sign. "You gotta run, mijo," I whispered, kissing his hair. "Be good for Mrs. Gable." I dropped him at the gate of Sun Harbor Elementary, the bricks still dark with morning dew. The second he was inside, I wasn't a mother anymore. I was a machine. I sprinted the 4 blocks to the Bubble Beacon laundromat. My second job, 8:01 a.m., I was 1 minute late. The air inside was thick, a humid fog of industrial bleach and cheap dryer sheets. My shift manager, Sal, just grunted at me as I tied on my second apron of the day. For 4 hours, I folded other people's clothes, sheets for hotels I couldn't afford, uniforms for jobs I didn't have. My hands, already raw from the bistro's sanitizer buckets, cracked under the heat of the commercial presses. This was the grind, the bistro shift and the laundry shift, stitch-welded together to make a life, and it still wasn't enough. I got back to my apartment building at 1:30 p.m., just enough time to shower and change before heading back to the bistro for prep. My apartment building was called The Mariner, which was a romantic name for a crumbling brick box that smelled like mold and boiled cabbage. The rent was 2 weeks overdue. The electricity bill was taped to my door, glowing pink, final notice. I was too tired to even look at it. I pushed open the lobby door and stopped. There was a new notice on the community bulletin board, stuck right over the faded flyer for cheap pizza. It was bright, obnoxious orange. At the top, in stark black letters, Northwest Commerce Control, the NCC. My stomach hollowed out. The NCC was the city's boogeyman. They handled permits, zoning, and commercial compliance, which meant they existed to fine small businesses and landlords into oblivion. The notice announced a mandatory emergency safety inspection for the entire building, effective in 72 hours. And at the bottom, the kicker. A mandatory non-refundable civic inspection fee of $200 per unit due upon inspection. $200. I might as well have been asked for $2 million. Mrs. Petrov from 3B was standing there, her hands twisted in her house dress. She was a tiny woman who'd lived here for 30 years. She looked like she was going to be sick. "They cannot," she whispered, her accent thick. It is the third time this year. A safety inspection, I asked, touching the paper. It felt official. It is not safety, she hissed, pulling me away from the door. It is them, the Iron Serpents. I frowned. I'd heard the name, the way everyone in Pioneer Bay had. They were a street-level crew, ran protection rackets, minor stuff. The Serpents? They work with the NCC. Mrs., Petrov explained, her eyes darting around the empty lobby. It is the new scam. The NCC comes, they inspect. They find violations. Oh, always. They find violations. The wiring is old. The pipes have mold. They give you a choice, pay $20,000 in fines, or be condemned. My blood went cold. Then, she continued, a new company comes. Blue Bite Services, or something clean. They offer a safety repair package. New wiring, new pipes, only $10,000. A bargain. You pay it. The NCC passes your inspection. And Blue Bite is... The Serpents, she finished. It is extortion legalized. They are squeezing the whole port, one building at a time. And we are next. My knees felt weak. $200 I didn't have, to avoid a $10,000 bill I could never pay. I leaned against the peeling wallpaper. And then a memory hit me, a memory I'd buried deep. Evan Cross. My ex, Theo's father, he'd vanished 2 years ago, right after Theo's 4th birthday, chasing some easy score. Evan was all cheap charm and bad decisions. He loved to talk big, to brag about the people he knew. I remembered him, leaning back at our kitchen table, smelling like cheap beer and ambition. You gotta know people. Lila, he'd said, tapping his temple. You gotta have connections. I got him. This guy I know, he is the NCC. He signs the permits for half the city. They run this town, baby, and I'm getting in. I had laughed at him then. I wasn't laughing now. A shiver, colder than the laundry's concrete floor, went straight down my spine. He knew I lived here. He knew I was broke. Was this a coincidence, or was Evan back, tangled up with the Serpents and the NCC, and using his own son's home as leverage? My phone buzzed in my pocket. It wasn't the usual reminder from Theo's school. It was an unknown number, a text message. It contained only 4 words. Take the night off. Save your strength. I stared at the screen. Save my strength for what? Was it a threat from Evan? A warning about the NCC, or was it connected to last night? My heart was hammering. The number was blocked, untraceable. I deleted it, my hand shaking. I couldn't take the night off. I needed every single hour, now more than ever. When I got to the Salt and Cedar Bistro at 2:50 p.m., the atmosphere was electric. The staff was scrubbing surfaces that were already clean. Maritza, the head chef, was screaming at a fish supplier about the quality of his halibut. I saw him before he saw me, Kellen Price. He wasn't in his crisp manager's shirt. He was in a wrinkled T-shirt, standing by the coat check with a small cardboard box in his hands. It held a stapler and a half-dead office plant. He saw me, his face, usually so smug, twisted into something ugly. He walked right up to me, blocking my path to the locker room. You? He snarled. Kellen, I'm clocking in. You did this. His voice was a low, venomous hiss. You knew him, didn't you? You set me up. I did what I cleaned up the glass you spilled. I'm on unpaid leave, indefinite. He jabbed a finger at my chest. The owner called me at home, said I was compromising the guest experience. You think you're smart. Lila, you think you won something. I just work here, Kellen. You invited the wolves into the hen house, he whispered, his eyes glittering. You have no idea what you've done. Good job. Lila, I hope you like getting eaten. He shoved past me, slamming his shoulder into mine, and stormed out the front door, leaving the box with the dead plant on the floor. I stood there for a second, Kellen's words ringing in my ears, mixing with the anonymous text. Save your strength. I hope you like getting eaten. I pushed open the kitchen doors. Maritza didn't look up from her cutting board. Moreno, you're here, good. Kellen said. Kellen is gone. Maritza cut me off. The owner backed the VIP. The menu is changed. Get a new apron. She slapped a single sheet of paper onto the steel counter. The menu for tonight. It was brutally simple. First Pacific oysters on the half shell, second pan-seared halibut, brown butter, third sea salt apple tart. That's it, I asked. He wants it rustic, she said. No fancy swirls, no foams, just the best ingredients, cooked perfectly. He called this morning. He specifically requested you assist me on plating. My head snapped up. Me chef, I'm a waitress. I don't plate. Tonight you do. Maritza pointed her knife at me. The man paying a 6-figure deposit to rent the room says you do. He said you had the steadiest hands he'd seen. You're on apples. Don't screw this up. The rest of the afternoon was a blur of polishing. 36 tables, 354 pieces of silverware, every glass, every plate, every candle holder. The bistro had never been cleaner. June found me in the wine cellar, counting napkins. So, she said, leaning against a rack of wine, Kellen's gone. Looks like it, I said, not stopping. 100, 101. You really don't know who that guy was, do you? He was a rich guy who hated Kellen's vibe. June laughed, a short, sharp sound. Lila, he's not a rich guy. He's the rich guy, at least around here. I stopped counting. What does that mean, June? June came closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Even though we were alone in the basement, his name is Pino Sforza. The name was Italian, but it meant nothing to me. He runs the Veil Consortium, she continued, ticking points off on her fingers. They're merchants. That's the official story. They own half the warehouses at the port. They own a logistics company. They consult on union disputes. So he's a shipping magnate. Sort of. June looked over her shoulder. A habit in this business. Pioneer Bay has 2 layers. Lila. There's the layer you see the tourists, the restaurants, the cops. Then there's the layer underneath. The iron serpents, the shakedowns, the guys who protect the trucks. The iron serpents. My blood ran cold for the second time that day. The Veil Consortium, June said, her voice barely audible, is the other side of that coin. They're the cleaners. They're the ones who dredge the harbor. If you're a small business and the serpents are leaning on you too hard, you don't call the police. You call Sforza. They're the ones who keep the other wolves in check. The room felt suddenly intensely cold. The NCC, the Iron Serpents, my ex-boyfriend, Evan, and now, Pino Sforza. I looked at the folded napkin in my hand. This wasn't a dinner party. This was a power play. And I, Lila Moreno, the single mom who couldn't pay her electric bill, was somehow standing in the dead center of it, holding a stack of apples. By 5 o'clock, the Salt and Cedar Bistro ceased to exist. A man in a dark suit, who hadn't spoken a word to any of us, hung a simple, heavy stock sign on the glass door, private event. He locked the door from the inside. The afternoon light, already weak and gray, was officially shut out. The room was transformed. This was not the rustic, cozy bistro from last night. This was a command center. All 36 tables were draped in linen so white it looked blue in the low light. A single unscented candle burned on every table. The settings were heavy, polished silver, and at every single place setting, there was a name card, not handwritten, engraved. The kitchen staff moved with a new, terrified precision. Maritza had forbidden music. The only sounds were the scrape of steel on steel and the hiss of the gas ranges. We, the front-of-house staff, felt like actors who hadn't been given the script. We were wearing new, freshly pressed white shirts and black aprons, delivered in boxes 2 hours earlier. "This is insane," June whispered, polishing a wine glass that was already perfect. "This isn't a dinner. It's a treaty negotiation." She was closer than she knew. At 5:30, the Northlight Risk team arrived. They were not bouncers. They were 4 men and 1 woman, all dressed in discreet dark gray suits with no visible weapons, just coiled earpieces. They didn't speak to us. The lead man, sharp and thin as a knife, just nodded to Maritza. Then they began their sweep. It was methodical and unnerving. One man checked under every single table. Another ran a small electronic device over the light fixtures and the ceiling vents. A third went into the kitchen and checked the walk-in freezer, the dry storage, and the alley exit, testing the locks. The woman went into Kellen's old office and looked at the CCTV hub. She pointed to the monitor. Camera 4, the corner booth, it has a blind spot. It's always been like that. The host, Alani, offered nervously. The Northlight woman just looked at her. We know. She tapped her earpiece. Marking camera 4, table 13 is compromised. My stomach fluttered. They weren't just checking for threats. They were mapping the room. At 6 o'clock, Pino Sforza arrived. He came in through the kitchen, not the front. He'd traded the ash-gray coat for a dark suit that probably cost more than my car. It was tailored so perfectly it seemed to move with him, a second skin. He wore no tie, just an open-collared white shirt. He looked like money, but the old, quiet kind that didn't need to shout. He stopped at the pass, inspecting Maritza's line. He nodded once, a sign of approval that made the chef visibly relax. Then, a commotion at the front. Someone was pounding on the locked glass door. It was them, the influencers from last night. They had their ring light and they were filming. Hey, the man's voice was muffled through the glass. We heard there's a huge party. We're on the list, Salt and Cedar. Let us in. The Northlight man at the door looked at Pino. Pino walked calmly to the entrance. He unlocked it and opened it just wide enough to speak. The phone was immediately in his face. Sir, are you the one who... Pino didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The air around him went cold. Good evening. Tonight, no one is recording. But we're press. We're covering the event. If you're holding a phone that is on, Pino said, his voice flat and final, you will leave. You can't do that, the woman shrieked. This is public. This is a private event. Pino's eyes were like ice. You are not guests. You are not welcome. Leave now. One of the Northlight men stepped up behind him. He was a full foot taller than the influencer and built like a refrigerator. He didn't touch the man. He just stood there. The influencer swallowed. His bravado vanished. He lowered the camera. Fine, whatever. This place is tragic anyway. They scurried away into the rain. Pino locked the door. He turned to the staff, his gaze sweeping over us. No phones, from anyone, including staff. Understood. We all nodded. The room was sealed. The first course was oysters, cold, briny, and served on beds of crushed ice. I was assigned the first table, table 1, Pino Sforza's table. I loaded the heavy silver tray. My heart was a bird trapped in my ribs. I kept seeing Kellen's face, kept hearing the glass shatter. I walked onto the floor. My hands were shaking. I could not stop them. The laundry press had left a raw red mark on my right palm, and my fingernails were chipped from scrubbing Theo's sneakers. I approached his table. He was alone, watching the room. I leaned in, my arm trembling from the weight of the ice. Oysters, sir. I set the plate down. The silver charger rattled against the wood. It was a tiny sound, but in the tense silence, it felt like a scream. I flinched, expecting to be reprimanded. Pino didn't look at the oysters, and he was looking at my hands. He saw the chipped polish. He saw the red, raw skin. He spoke, his voice so low only I could hear it. You are bowing. I froze. Sir, you're serving, not surrendering, he said, his eyes lifting to meet mine. They were intense, but not unkind. Do not bow. Your spine is the first piece of armor. Straighten it. I felt my shoulders, which had been hunched around my ears, pull back. I stood up straight. It felt foreign. Better, he said. He picked up a small fork and nodded. I was dismissed. As I walked back to the kitchen, I felt his gaze on my back. It wasn't lecherous. It was analytical. The guests began to arrive at 6:30. It was the strangest collection of people I had ever seen. They were all oil and water. A heavy-set man who owned, June whispered, 3 shipping lines, A sharp woman in a severe suit who ran the cold storage union, a young, brilliant lawyer known for suing the city on behalf of displaced tenants. And then a small, nervous group of 3. My stomach dropped. I knew one of them. Mrs. Petrov from my apartment building. She looked terrified. She was with 2 other small-time landlords from the Port District, all of them clutching file folders, the NCC victims. Finally, a table of 3 that looked completely out of place. They wore rumpled blazers, looked exhausted, and their eyes missed nothing. Alani seated them near the kitchen. From the Cascadia Ledger, she whispered to me, "Investigative reporters." The room was full. The tension was thick enough to cut. These people weren't friends. They were factions, all gathered by the man at table 1. Then, at 7 o'clock, the last guests arrived. The front door opened, and the Northlight man checked the list. I looked over, and my breath caught in my throat. My blood turned to ice. I knew him. Evan Cross. My ex, Theo's father. He looked slicker than when I'd last seen him, but just as cheap. His suit was a shiny, synthetic blue. His hair was wet with gel. He was smiling that easy, false smile that used to fool me. He wasn't alone. He was walking beside an older, imposing man with silver hair and a look of profound, bored arrogance. The man wore an expensive watch and a scowl. Alani, the host, greeted them. "Inspector Reed, welcome, Mr. Cross. We have your table ready." Inspector Reed of the Northwest Commerce Control. Evan was with the NCC, Mrs. Petrov's story. My morning's dread it all slammed into me. Evan wasn't just connected. He was here. He was part of the sickness. Evan scanned the room, his eyes landing on me. His smile faltered for just a second. He hadn't expected me to be here. Not like this. Pino Sforza watched them walk in. He showed no reaction. He simply lifted one finger, summoning Alani. She hurried over. "Sir." "Mr. Reed and Mr. Cross," Pino said quietly. "Move them." "Sir, to where?" "Table 13, Pino said. Alani looked confused. "But sir, that's by the service station. And the camera, the blind spot." "I know," Pino said. "Put them at table 13, right where everyone can see them." I was reeling, trying to process Evan's face, the danger, the fact that my entire broken past was now sitting at a table waiting for me to serve it. I went to the bar, needing a glass of water. My hands were shaking again. I gripped the counter, and I looked out the window. Across the street, half hidden in the shadows of a defunct flower shop, a figure stood in the rain. It was Kellen Price. He was staring at the bistro, his face a mask of fury. He was on his phone, talking rapidly, his free hand chopping the air. He wasn't just watching, he was reporting. I grabbed June's arm. "June, across the street, by the awning." June squinted into the dark, her face hardened instantly. "That son of a snake, he's spotting." "What do we do?" June didn't panic. She didn't call Northlight. She simply reached her hand beneath the overhanging lip of the zinc bar. Her fingers found something I never knew existed. I heard nothing, but I saw her press down. "What was that?" I whispered. "Old-timer tech," June said, her eyes still locked on Kellen. "It's a silent button. Doesn't call the police. It just flashes a small red light in the back alley, a signal for the external eyes." She looked at me, a grim smile on her face. "Northlight just got the message. Kellen's being watched." The main rush was over. The last of the halibut had gone out, the smell of seared fish and brown butter slowly giving way to the sharper, sweeter scent of apples. I was in the kitchen, assigned to the final course. 36 sea salt apple tarts. Maritza had baked the shells, but I was tasked with the filling. I was standing at the steel prep counter, a mountain of apples in front of me and a small, lethally sharp paring knife in my hand. I focused on the apple, trying to peel the skin in one long, perfect spiral, but I couldn't. My right hand was shaking. It wasn't a vibration. It was a tremor, a deep, uncontrollable shudder that ran from my shoulder down to my fingertips, Every time I looked through the pass, through the swinging door, I saw him. Table 13, Evan. Evan, who had promised me the world and left me with an overdue rent notice. Evan, who had held his infant son and then vanished. Evan sitting there in a cheap suit, clinking glasses with the man who was threatening to condemn my building. The NCC, the iron serpents, the $200 inspection fee. The knife slipped on the apple's skin. Jumping toward my thumb, I yelped and dropped it. It clattered onto the steel. "Moreno, you dropped my knife. You buy it," Maritza snapped, not looking up from the oven. "Sorry, chef." I picked it up, my face burning. I was a liability. I was failing. A shadow fell over my prep station. "Your right hand is shaking." I jumped, spinning around. It was Pino Sforza, and he wasn't supposed to be in the kitchen. He was the guest. He was the king. He stood beside me, not invading my space, but occupying it completely. He had taken off his suit jacket, and the white of his shirt seemed impossibly bright against the kitchen's grime. "Is it fatigue, or is it fear?" he asked. His voice was quiet, a low rumble beneath the clang of pots. I couldn't lie. I couldn't wrap this up in a neat, serviceable excuse. "Both," I whispered. He nodded, as if this was the only logical answer. He didn't tell me to get a grip. He didn't look at me with pity. He simply walked past me to the industrial sink. I watched, confused. As he turned on the tap, he systematically rolled up the sleeves of his $1,000 shirt, exposing thick, strong forearms. He washed his hands. He scrubbed his nails. He took his time, as methodical as the security team sweeping for cameras. He dried his hands on a clean side towel, then turned back to me. He gestured to the large copper pot simmering on a back burner. "The caramel?" "Chef Maritza one," he called, his voice respectful but full of authority. "The salt." Maritza, who took orders from no one, wordlessly pointed to me. Pino looked at the pot, then at me. "The sea salt for the caramel." I reached for the small box of salt flakes. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely grip the cardboard. "Don't apologize for shaking." I froze, my hand hovering over the salt. He said it again, his eyes on my trembling fingers. "Don't apologize for it. I shake, too." I looked at him, confused. This man, who had silenced a room with a glance, who had made Kellen Price disappear? "You, before a big decision," he clarified, his gaze intense. "Before I move a piece I can't take back, my hand does exactly that." He held his own hand up. It was perfectly, unnervingly steady. "It means you're human. It means you know the stakes." He gently took the box of salt from my fingers. His touch was brief, but his skin was warm. He turned to the pot. "The trick is to use the salt to cut the sweet, not to fight it." He tossed a measure of the flakes into the bubbling, molten sugar. The room filled instantly with the rich, nutty smell of brown butter and salt. The kitchen sounds the clatter, the hissing. Maritza's low curses seemed to fade to a dull roar. The air around the stove was warm. For a second, the world shrank to just this, the smell of the caramel, the heat from the stove, and this impossible man standing next to me. He stirred the pot once, then looked at me. It wasn't the look Evan used to give me, that hungry, selfish, taking look. It was a look of simple, quiet assessment. It was soft, but it wasn't weak. It was the gaze of a man who saw every single crack and wasn't afraid of them. He turned from the stove and stepped toward me. I flinched, expecting him to point out another flaw. Instead, he gestured to the strings of my apron, which I had tied in a frantic, sloppy knot at the small of my back. "You'll snag this on a door handle," he said. Before I could protest, he stepped behind me. I stopped breathing. He was close. I could feel the heat radiating from his body. I could smell the faint, clean scent of his shirt, something like starch and expensive soap, cutting through the kitchen's fog. He didn't grab me, and he didn't put his hands on my waist. His movements were deft and impersonal, but my skin burned where his fingers accidentally brushed the thin fabric of my shirt. He untangled the knot I had made. His knuckles grazed the small of my back. It was nothing. A feather light, accidental touch. It was everything, a jolt, pure and simple. like static electricity, shot straight up my spine. My breathing hitched. The air between us felt heavy, thick and charged. He pulled the two strings tight, cinching the apron firmly at my waist. He tied a new knot. It was clean, secure, and perfect. And then he stepped back. He didn't linger. He didn't lean in. He put the boundary back in place himself. I turned around slowly to face him. My hand, I realized, had stopped shaking. His eyes were serious. "After tonight," he said, his voice a promise, "you will not be laughed at again." He used an intimate pronoun, a word that suggested we were in this. Not just you, but it wasn't possessive. It was a statement of fact. The kitchen door burst open, slamming against the wall. June rushed in, her face pale and streaked with sweat. "Chef, we have a problem. Oh." She stopped dead when she saw Pino Sforza standing by the prep counter as if he belonged there. "Sir, I'm sorry." "What is it, Juneteenth?" Pino asked. He knew her name. Of course he did. "It's table 13, she said, breathing hard. "Inspector Reed, he's loud. He's complaining about the halibut. He wants more wine, and he's demanding to see the manager." "Evan, Reed." My stomach twisted. Maritza cursed, gesturing to Kellen's empty, dark office. "We have no manager." "Yes, you do," Pino said. He calmly rolled his sleeves back down. He fastened the silver links at his cuffs. The man from the kitchen was gone, and the man who ran the Vale Consortium was back. "I'll take it." He didn't wait for a response. He walked to the wine storage, scanning the labels. He didn't choose the most expensive. He selected a specific bottle of Barbera, dark and heavy. I moved to the pass, pushing the door open just a crack, watching him. He walked onto the floor. He moved with that same unhurried, silent grace. Inspector Reed was leaning back in his chair, laughing at something Evan had said. He saw Pino approaching and his face soured. "Finally," and Reed boomed, "Took you long enough, I asked for the manager." "I am hosting this evening," Pino said, his voice placid. He placed the unopened bottle of Barbera on the table between them. "We want more wine," Reed demanded. "The service here is a joke." Pino gestured to the bottle. "Drink up, Inspector. Tonight, everything is on me." Reed let out a short, barking laugh. He looked at Evan, then back at Pino. "You think you're a big shot, don't you? Buying out the room, you think that makes you king?" Pino smiled. It wasn't a real smile. It was a sliver of ice. He leaned in, just slightly, not close enough to be a threat, but close enough to be intimate. "I just want you to enjoy your meal, Inspector," he said, his voice perfectly pleasant, "because tomorrow morning the bill you sign will be a deposition." The air crackled. Reed's laughter died in his throat. His entire body went rigid, his face turning a dull, waxy white. Pino didn't wait for an answer. He straightened up. His gaze left Reed and swept across the table, past him, and found me, watching from the kitchen door. And then I saw Evan. He hadn't looked up, not once, not at Pino, not at Reed, and not at me. He was staring at his empty halibut plate, his hands hidden in his lap. He looked small, and he looked terrified. He couldn't meet my gaze. It was the first crack, the first sign that the man who had haunted my mornings, the man tied to the iron serpents in the NCC, was nothing but a coward. Pino Sforza turned and walked calmly back to the kitchen, leaving the untouched bottle of wine on the table like a grenade with the pin pulled. Pino Sforza re-entered the kitchen. The brief, intense warmth from our encounter at the stove was gone. He was all business, his face a calm, neutral mask. He didn't look at me, but at the apples I had finally, steadily, begun to slice. "The tarts, Lila, they'll be ready in 20 minutes, he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded, my hands moving with a new, strange precision. "Yes, 20 minutes. He left, pushing back out into the dining room. I was alone with Maritza and the roar of the ventilation fans. The kitchen felt like a pressurized airlock, a safe zone separating me from the conflict in the main room. Maritza slid up beside me, her eyes on the swinging door, her voice a low, gravelly whisper that barely carried over the sound of the ovens. "You know what this is?" "Right," she muttered, pretending to check the oven seals. I kept my eyes on my knife. "It's a dinner, chef." "This is not a dinner. This is an execution." She nodded toward the door. "Table 9, the Cascadia Ledger. Sforza didn't just invite them for a good meal. He invited them to watch him gut the Northwest Commerce Control. This whole night is a stage." My heart, which had just steadied, began to hammer against my ribs. A stage, with Inspector Reed and Evan sitting at table 13, my ex-boyfriend, the man who had bragged about his connections to the NCC. Maritza was wrong. Sforza wasn't just gutting the pigs. He was gutting my pig. As if on cue, a sharp, crystalline sound cut through the kitchen's din. Ting, ting, ting. It was the sound of a silver spoon tapping against a water glass. I moved to the pass, pushing the door open a crack. Pino Sforza was on his feet at table 1. The entire restaurant, all 36 tables, had gone silent. Every guest, the ship owners, the union bosses, the terrified landlords, the reporters, and the 2 men at table 13 was looking at him. "Thank you all for coming tonight," Pino's voice said. It wasn't loud, but it carried to every corner. It was a voice that didn't need to shout. "I reserved all 36 tables in this restaurant for 2 reasons." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "The first," he said, "is respect. Respect for the people who work here. Respect for the labor that makes this port run, the hands that cook your food, serve your wine, and wash your linens." His eyes found me in the crack of the door. Just for a second, he was talking about my shaking hands. He was talking about the spill. He was talking about me, on my knees, cleaning up Kellen's mess. "And the second reason," he continued, his voice hardening almost imperceptibly, "is to talk about the bills, the absurd, irrational, impossible bills that are suffocating this community, the fees that come from ghosts, the permits that are required for breathing, the fines that are designed not to ensure safety, but to break your backs." At table 13, Inspector Reed scoffed, but he looked uneasy. "They are not ghosts, Mr. Sforza." The voice was thin, shaking, but clear. It was Mrs. Petrov. She was standing up at her table, clutching the strap of her purse. "They are not ghosts," she said again, louder. "They are the NCC, and they are thieves." A murmur went through the room. The reporters at table 9 were writing so fast their pens were blurring. "Mrs. Petrov fumbled with the folder in front of her and threw a stack of photographs onto her table. "They said my building had catastrophic mold. They gave me 72 hours, pay $20,000 in fines, or be condemned." The union boss from the cold storage stood up. "She's right. They hit my warehouses 2 weeks ago. Same story. But they offered a solution." She spat the word. "A safety contractor they recommended, a company called Blue Bite Services." At the mention of Blue Bite, I saw Evan flinch. The ship owner at the next table slammed his hand down. "Blue Bite, they're a front. It's the Iron Serpents. It's a shakedown, plain and simple." The room was electric. Pino had set the fire, and now he was just watching it burn. I pulled my head back into the kitchen, my tray of tarts ready. They're telling everyone," I whispered to June, who was running the bar station. "That's the point, Lila," June said, grabbing her own tray. "Now, we serve dessert, we do our jobs, but keep your eyes open." We pushed through the doors. The room was loud now. People talking over each other, comparing notes, their fear turning to collective anger. I moved through the chaos, a ghost in a black apron. As I set a tart down at the reporter's table, I saw Inspector Reed. He wasn't yelling, he was quiet, too quiet. He had his phone in his hand, held low, his thumb flying over the screen. He lifted it to his ear. "It's Reed," he muttered, trying to speak under the noise. "Get me eyes. Run the camera check. I want a visual on table 9. Now." He was looking for a bug, or he was activating one. Across the room, standing near the bar, the woman from Northlight Risk subtly tapped the earpiece she was wearing. High above the reporter's table, nestled in the filigree of an antique chandelier, a tiny red light blinked once and then went dark. They had found Reed's camera, and they had just cut his feed. Pino Sforza, still standing, watched Reed put the dead phone back in his pocket. He knew. He had anticipated it all. At table 13, Evan looked like he was going to be sick. He pushed his chair back, the legs scraping loudly on the wood floor. "Restroom," he mumbled to Reed, not looking at him. But he didn't walk toward the restrooms. He made a sharp right, heading for the glass side door that led to the narrow, rain-slicked smoking patio. He was running. I didn't think. My feet just moved. It was my section. The patio tables, though empty, were technically my responsibility. I had to pass him. It was an instinct. I picked up my empty tray and moved toward the same door, as if to clear the empty tables outside. I pushed the door open. The cold, damp Seattle air hit me like a slap. Evan was there, backed against the far brick wall, fumbling with a cigarette. His hands were shaking violently. He looked up, and when he saw me, his eyes widened with pure, animal panic. "Lila," he hissed. "What are you doing? Get back inside." "I'm working, Evan," I said. My voice was cold. I felt strangely calm. I was the one with the steady hands now. He took a step toward me and grabbed my arm. His grip was weak, sweaty. "Lila, listen to me. You need to get away from Sforza. He is not safe. You have no idea what you're in the middle of. He's dangerous." He was trying to protect me. After everything, the hypocrisy was so thick I could barely breathe. I yanked my arm out of his grip. The metal tray in my other hand didn't even rattle. "I have been raising our son alone for 2 years. Evan," I said, my voice low and sharp, "I work 2 jobs. I haven't slept more than 4 hours at a stretch since you left, and I am telling you, right now, that raising a child by myself has been hard, but it was always, always safer than being near you." My words hit him like a physical blow. The fake concern in his eyes vanished, replaced by raw desperation. "You don't get it," he sputtered, stepping closer, his voice a frantic whisper. "This is big. This is real money. That inspection. The NCC money, I was doing it for us." I just stared at him. "Us, there is no us, Evan." "Yes, for you, for Theo." His words were tumbling out, frantic and uncontrolled. He was confessing. "I was going to set us up. I can get you out of that dump. The inspection cycle. It isn't even real. It's next week. I pushed it up for us. I can control the list." He had said it. He had admitted it. "A fake inspection schedule," I repeated, the words tasting like ash. "It's not fake," he tried, backpedaling. It's flexible. I can help you. Lila, you don't need him." He gestured wildly back toward the restaurant, toward Pino. He looked at me, his eyes pleading, still believing his charm could fix this. He had just admitted to extorting his own neighbors, to threatening my home, and he was trying to frame it as a gift. I said nothing. I just held his gaze. The panic returned to his face when he saw the coldness in mine. He realized what he had just admitted. I turned my back on him and pulled the door open. June was standing right on the other side, a rag in her hand, calmly wiping down the inside of the glass door. She hadn't been smoking. She'd been listening. She looked at me, then looked down at the small server's notepad she had tucked into her apron pocket. She had heard every single word. She clicked her pen. I watched as she scribbled 2 words on the pad. "NCC, next week, fake." She tapped the notepad with her pen, her eyes flicking for just a second toward the reporters at table 9, who were just finishing their tarts. She gave me a grim, satisfied smile. The trap had been set, and Evan, stupid, desperate Evan, had just walked right in and handed us the bait. Evan stumbled back inside from the patio, his face a sickly pale gray. He avoided my eyes, avoided everyone's, and slid back into his seat at table 13 as if returning to his own execution. He poured himself a glass of the Barbera Pino had left, his shaking hand splashing the dark red wine onto the white linen. June brushed past me, her server's notebook held flat in her hand. She walked directly to table 9. I watched, mesmerized. The game was moving faster than I could follow. June bent low, pretending to ask about coffee. The reporters looked up. June's hand, holding her pen, tapped the note she'd just written. NCC. Next week. Fake. The lead reporter, a woman with tired eyes and a sharp haircut, read the note. Her eyes widened. She looked at June, who gave a nearly imperceptible nod toward the patio door where Evan had just been. The reporter's gaze flicked to Evan, then back to June. Understanding dawned. She nodded. June palmed the small page and slipped it to her under the table as she cleared a dessert plate. Pino, from table 1. Watched the exchange. He saw it all. He had loaded the gun, and now June and I had just handed him a silver bullet. A moment later, the woman from Northlight risked the one who had mapped the cameras walked to table 9. She bent down, ostensibly to offer a new bottle of water. I saw her slide something small and black across the table. A USB drive. It vanished into the reporter's hand. June came back to the bar, her face flushed with adrenaline. "What was that?" I whispered. "That," June said, "is the payload. Maritza told me. Sforza's lawyer has been building it for months." "What's on it?" "The money," June breathed. "A complete map. Every fake invoice from Blue Byte Services, every wire transfer from Blue Byte's account straight to the Iron Serpents, and from the Serpents into a civic integrity fund run by the NCC. It's the whole web." My mind was reeling, a web of extortion, and Evan was tangled right in the middle. I looked down at my own hands. They were raw from the apples and the laundry, but they were steady now. "I have something too," I said, my voice quiet. June looked at me. "What?" "I don't know if it's anything. It's stupid." "Nothing's stupid tonight. Lila, Kellen was always shorting my hours, my pay. He'd say I was late, or that a table walked out, so I started keeping a log. I fumbled in my locker in the back, pulling out my worn, dog-eared server's notebook. Tucked in the back was a folded piece of paper, a spreadsheet I'd made at the public library. "I call it my poverty data," I said, my face heating. "I just wanted to prove he was stealing from me." I unfolded it. It was a simple grid. Date, shift, manager on duty, tips reported, tips actual, and a notes column. "Look," I said, my finger tracing the lines. "September 12th, Kellen was on a 5-top canceled, said they felt sick. I made $60, and look. September 26th, Kellen, a whole party, 8 people, canceled last minute. Car trouble. I made $45. October 10th, Kellen, 2 tables canceled." June looked at me, not understanding. "So Kellen's a thief, and he's bad luck. We knew that." "June," I said, my voice shaking as the pieces clicked into place. "I was talking to Mrs. Petrov from my building. She gave me her NCC dates. Look." I pointed to the dates. September 12th, the day her neighbor got the first mold inspection. September 26th, the day the first floor got their wiring violation. October 10th, the day the NCC fined the entire building. June's jaw dropped. "They weren't just canceling," she whispered. "No, they were coordinating. Kellen was clearing the floor on the same days the NCC was running its shakedowns across the port. He was making sure the restaurant was empty, losing money, so the owner would be soft, ripe for his own inspection fee. He was part of it," June breathed. "He was the inside man, helping the Serpents pressure the entire block." Before June could even speak, the Northlight woman appeared at her elbow. "We heard," she said, her voice like ice. She held out her hand. "The spreadsheet. May I?" I gave it to her. She looked at it for a long, hard second. "This is good. This connects the street level to the inside. This is the link we were missing." She looked back at us. Our man outside also got a present. She tapped her earpiece, and a second later, her phone lit up. She showed us the screen. It was a grainy, long-distance shot, taken from across the street in the dark. It was Kellen. He was standing under the flower shop awning, but he wasn't alone. He was shaking hands with a large man whose face was in shadow. but whose left hand, the one taking the envelope from Kellen, was covered in a distinctive, intricate tattoo of a snake. "Kellen Price," June whispered, getting his paycheck from an iron serpent. The Northlight woman smiled, a thin, dangerous expression. Proof of payment. She pocketed her phone, and with it, my spreadsheet. "Thank you for your service, ladies." She melted back into the shadows of the restaurant. I leaned against the wall. My legs felt like they were going to give out. My data, my stupid little spreadsheet, it was real. It meant something. I had been investigating my own life, and I had accidentally stumbled into a war. It was too much. The bistro suddenly felt hot, loud, and suffocating. Evan's cowardice, Reed's arrogance, Pino's cold, calculating power. I needed air. I needed to breathe. My phone, tucked deep in my apron pocket in my locker, buzzed. I'd hidden it there, terrified of breaking Pino's no phones rule. I pulled it out, the same unknown number from that morning. A new text. "When you're tired, go to the rooftop herb garden. The wind is lighter there." It wasn't a suggestion. It was an invitation. It was an escape. I slipped out the kitchen's back door into the service hallway and took the narrow, concrete stairs 2 at a time. The door to the roof groaned on its hinges. I stepped out. The Seattle night hit me. The wind was fierce up here, carrying the cold, sharp smell of the sound. But he was right. Here, tucked behind the restaurant's large, old-fashioned sign, was Maritza's herb garden. Planter boxes of rosemary, thyme, and basil, sheltered from the worst of the wind. The rain was a fine, cold mist, and the smell of wet herbs was overwhelming. He was there. Pino Sforza. He stood at the far railing, his suit jacket gone, his white shirt sleeves stark against the dark city. His coat was draped over the railing. He was looking down at Pioneer Bay, a king surveying his kingdom. He didn't turn when I approached. He knew it was me. "The air is better up here," he said, his voice quiet, almost lost in the wind. I walked to stand beside him, a few feet of distance between us. The city lights spread out below, a carpet of blurred jewels. "How did you know?" I asked, my voice small. "About Kellen, about the NCC, about me?" "My business is the port," he said, turning to look at me. "I make it my business to know every rat in the walls." He saw me shiver. A full-body tremor from the cold and the adrenaline. "You're cold." He stepped closer. He didn't reach for his coat to offer it. He just moved into my space. The wind seemed to die down, blocked by his body. The rain was misting my face, and I felt a single, cold drop roll from my hairline down my cheek, like a tear. He lifted his hand. He didn't touch me. He held his hand suspended in the air between us, a question. "May I?" he asked. His voice was rough. I couldn't speak. I just nodded. His hand was warm. He brushed the droplet from my cheek with the pad of his thumb. It was the lightest touch, but it sent a shock straight through me. His thumb grazed my cheekbone, and I closed my eyes. "I'm afraid," I whispered, the confession torn out of me. "Of Reed of Cross." "No," I said, opening my eyes. He was closer now. "Of you, of this power. You move people around like pieces on a board. You're terrifying." His eyes softened. The cold steel I'd seen earlier was gone, replaced by something deep and almost sad. "Lila," he said, "power is only worth keeping if you use it to shelter others from the rain." He held my gaze. The silence stretched. There was only the sound of the wind, the distant city, and my own heart hammering. He looked at my mouth, then back up to my eyes. He leaned in. It was impossibly slow. He was giving me every chance to pull away. The kiss was nothing like I expected. It wasn't the hungry, selfish kiss of Evan. It wasn't a kiss of ownership or passion. It was soft. It was hesitant. It was warm. It tasted of the rain on my skin and the faint, lingering salt from the caramel. It was a kiss of recognition. My breathing stopped. I felt his other hand come up, not to grab me, not to pull me closer, but to rest gently on my upper back. his palm flat between my shoulder blades. It was a touch of pure support. My hands, of their own accord, came up to rest on his chest, gripping the fabric of his shirt. The kiss deepened, just a fraction, a promise of something more, a future I couldn't even imagine. It was steady. It was sure. It was too much. I pulled back, just an inch. My voice was a breath. That's enough. He didn't push. He didn't question or cajole. He didn't try to change my mind. He immediately respected the boundary. He drew back, a small, genuine smile touching the corner of his mouth. It transformed his face. Enough, he agreed, his voice husky. He kept his hand on my back, a warm, steady pressure, as if to prove he could hold me without taking. A small, electronic chime sounded. It was sharp and clear. Even in the wind, Pino's hand went to his ear, where a tiny, almost invisible earpiece was nestled. He listened. The smile faded. The warmth in his eyes was replaced by the steel. The man who sheltered was gone. The man who fought was back. He looked at me, his gaze sharp. It's time. The game is moving. What? Table 13, and he said, turning to head for the door. Inspector Reed and Evan Cross just ordered dessert. They ordered the special. It was a code. The check is coming due, he said. It's time for the final act. We came down the narrow stairs from the roof. The air in the service hallway was hot and smelled of old grease, a sharp contrast to the clean, cold rain. My skin was still tingling from his touch, my mind reeling. That kiss, it wasn't a promise of a happy ending. It was a promise of a fight. Pino didn't look at me, and he was back in the zone, his face hard. He adjusted his cuffs, the silver links clicking into place. Stay in the kitchen, Lila, he said, his voice low. It's safer. No, I said, surprised at my own voice. I served the main course. I'm serving the dessert. He stopped, his hand on the swinging door, and he looked at me. A long, assessing gaze. He saw the tremor was gone. He saw the new hard line of my spine. He nodded. Once. As you wish. He pushed through the door. I went to the pass. Maritza and the other cooks were already wheeling out the main cart. It wasn't just my 36 tarts. It was a spectacle. A 3-tiered tower, a croquembouche of golden, caramelized apple tarts glistening with sea salt. Pino stood in the center of the room. By the now empty table 16, the cart was wheeled beside him. Ladies and gentlemen, Pino said, his voice cutting through the resumed chatter, dessert. A few people clapped politely, but Inspector Reed at table 13 looked annoyed. Just serve the damn things. We're busy men. In a moment, Inspector, Pino said smoothly. He gestured to the tower. But first, a small local custom. He reached down and picked up a small, laser-cut wooden card, shaped like an apple and a pen. This, he said, is a wishing tree, but tonight it is a memory tree, a community log. I invite anyone here who has a story about the Northwest Commerce Control to write it down. One sentence. Hang it on the tree. Let us see what the harvest looks like. He handed the first card and pen to Mrs. Petrov. She looked terrified, her eyes darting to Reed. Reed was watching her, his face a mask of bored menace. Go on, Mrs. Petrov, Pino said gently. Your story deserves light. Her hand, gnarled with age, shook as she took the pen. She scribbled something, her lips moving. Then, with a defiant sob, she stood and walked to the tower. She hung the card on a lower branch. Then the man from the cold storage union stood up. He grabbed a card. My turn. He wrote his story and hung it. Then the ship owner, then the other landlords, one by one. The victims Pino had invited walked to the tower, wrote their fine, their threat, their date of inspection, and hung the small wooden apples. The Cascadia Ledger reporters were on their feet, their cameras out, real ones, not phones documenting every new card. The tower, once a beautiful dessert, was becoming a monument to their extortion. This is an outrage. Inspector Reed slammed his hand on his table. He stood up, his chair scraping back. This is slander, a coordinated libelous attack on a city agency. This is a setup. You can't do this." Pino Sforza remained perfectly still. "Inspector, I'm not accusing anyone. I'm simply serving dessert." He smiled, a cold, thin expression. "But since you seem upset, perhaps we should move on to the entertainment." He nodded to the Northlight woman by the wall. I hadn't even seen it. A white projector screen was descending silently from a hidden recess in the ceiling, covering the far wall. The lights in the bistro dimmed. Inspector Reed looked confused. "What is this what new circus?" The projector flared to life. The first image was a high-resolution scan of a document. At the top, the logo, Blue Bite Services. Below it, mandatory safety repair contract. "Mrs. Petrov," Pino said, his voice resonating in the darkroom. "Does this look familiar? It's the $10,000 contract your building was offered to avoid condemnation." "That's a private corporation," Reed shouted, his voice cracking. "It has nothing to do with the NCC. This proves nothing." "I agree," Pino said. "It's just a contract. Let's look at the signatures." The image on the screen zoomed in, pushing past the legal jargon to the very last page, the signature line for the contractor. "Community partner and liaison Evan Cross." The room was dead silent. I could hear my own blood roaring in my ears. Every eye in the room swiveled to table 13. Evan Cross leaped to his feet, knocking his wine glass over. The red wine spread across the white linen like a blood stain. "No!" he yelled, his voice a panicked squeak. "That's not... I was a consultant. I was just a consultant. I was helping them connect with the community. I didn't know what they were doing." He was lying. His eyes were wide with terror. "That's a very interesting claim, Mr. Cross." The lead reporter from Table 9 stood up. She held the small USB drive Pino's team had given her. "Because we have a few documents of our own." The image on the screen changed. It was no longer the contract. It was a bank statement, a wireframe map of accounts. "This," the reporter said, her voice crisp and prosecutorial, "is the money trail. Blue Bite Services, an LLC with no assets, billing for $10,000. That money is then wired, minus a 10% fee, to the Iron Serpents Holding Company. And from there." She highlighted a new box. "It is donated to the Civic Integrity Fund, a political action committee, controlled by the NCC." "That's circumstantial," Reed bellowed. "You can't prove I'm connected." "We don't need to, Inspector," the reporter said, "but we can connect Mr. Cross." The slide changed again. A new statement. E.C. Consulting, Evans Company. "These," she said, pointing, "are cash withdrawals, $5,000, $8,000, $10,000, all made from a secondary account, and the dates of these withdrawals, Mr. Cross, they match to the hour. The exact moments the NCC issued its notice of violation, fines to the victims in this room." Evan was hyperventilating. He looked at Reed. Tell them it's not true." But Reed had turned his back on him. Reed was just a bureaucrat. Evan was the link. Evan was the fall guy. Evan looked at me, his eyes pleading. Lila, please, I did it for Theo. I did it for us." I had been standing by the pass, frozen, but now I moved. I walked out from the kitchen, my footsteps the only sound in the room. I stopped 10 feet from him. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. The time for that was long gone. My voice was low, and it cut through the silence like a razor. "You were once trusted to be a stepfather to my son. Evan," I said. "It turns out you are only good at counting." He recoiled, as if I had struck him. His face crumpled. It was a mortal wound. He sank back into his chair, a broken, empty man. Inspector Reed, meanwhile, was frantically stabbing at his phone. He looked like a cornered rat. His eyes dart. "You are all dead," Reed hissed, his voice low and shaking with fury. He put the phone to his ear, turning his back to the room. "Alana, it's me. It's all gone to hell. Sforza has everything, the contracts, the accounts. Yes, Blue Bite. Get me out. Send a team. I don't care how. Just get me out now." He was so panicked. He was shouting into the phone. The Northlight woman, standing by the projector, leaned toward Pino. He's on an open line. Confirmed. The call is to Deputy Director Alana Crest. We have the trace. Pino nodded. He stepped forward. Inspector Reed seems to be calling for help, he announced to the room. Reed spun around, his face purple. You're damn right I am. You're finished. Sforza you, your little restaurant. All of you. Good, Pino said, and his voice, for the first time, was loud. It was a roar that shook the glasses. Because we invited guests as well, and gentlemen. You are late. The main entrance doors of the bistro, the ones that had been locked since 5 p.m., swung open. 2 men and a woman in dark, severe suits entered. They were not security. They were lawyers. They were followed by a man holding a professional video camera, the bright white light flooding the room, landing directly on Inspector Reed, who froze, his hand shielding his eyes. What? Who are you? Reed stammered. A woman stepped forward, her heels clicking on the hardwood. Good evening, Inspector Reed. I'm Maria Flores from the Pioneer Bay City Committee. This is Councilman Bissett and our independent counsel. The camera zoomed in on Reed's sweating, panicked face. What is this? He whispered. This is entrapment. This, Councilman Bissett said, his voice booming with authority, is a formal city inquiry. We have received, in the last 2 hours, credible, detailed allegations of racketeering, economic extortion, and criminal conspiracy involving the Northwest Commerce Control. Maria Flores stepped right up to Reed. As of 8:15 p.m. tonight, she declared, all pending and future NCC safety inspections in the Pioneer Bay District are indefinitely frozen. A full-scale investigation into economic crimes, in conjunction with the Port Authority, is hereby opened. She gestured to the 2 grim-faced men behind her. Inspector Reed, you will come with us. We have some questions for you about the Civic Integrity Fund. Reed didn't move, and he was paralyzed. The room was so quiet I could hear the candle flames flicker. And then, from the back table, Mrs. Petrov began to clap. Mrs. Petrov's solitary clap was sharp, defiant, and still hanging in the air when the world ended. It was not a sound, it was a feeling, a heavy, hydraulic thunk from the basement, deep in the building's bones, and in that same instant, every light in the Salt and Cedar Bistro died. The projector screen went black, the chandeliers went dark, the candles, which had seemed so bright, were instantly snuffed out by the vacuum of pressure. We were plunged into a pitch-black, suffocating silence. A woman screamed. It was Alani, our host, her voice thin and terrified near the front. Nobody move, Pino Sforza's voice commanded. It was not a shout, it was a roar, a physical force that cut through the panic. Stay low and stay quiet. Another sound. The heavy front glass door rattled violently in its frame, then a thud, as if someone had run into it. They're locked in! A man's voice yelled from outside. My blood froze. This wasn't a power failure. The iron serpents. Kellen, they weren't trying to escape. They were cutting the power to get Reed and Evan out. This was an extraction. Secure the inspector, one of the city committee members yelled, his voice tight with panic. Click, clack, thump. From the front door, a heavy, metallic sound. Maglocks engaged, the Northlight woman's voice said, sharp and calm from the darkness near the bar. All exits are sealed. A low-voltage hum kicked in, and the emergency lights sputtered to life. They weren't bright white. They were a sickening, pulsing red, designed only to show you the exits. The entire restaurant, filled with panicked, half-seen figures, looked like a scene from hell. Pino Sforza was suddenly at my side. He must have moved through the dark like a panther. His face was all hard planes and shadows in the red glow. They cut the main breaker, he said. His voice, a low, fast rumble, meant only for me. They're trying to breach the kitchen. I need you. He shoved something cold and heavy into my hand, a large, old-fashioned brass key. The wine cellar. It has a reinforced door, he commanded. Take Mrs. Petrov. Take the other landlords, the reporters, anyone who isn't a fighter. Get them down those stairs. Lock the door from the inside and do not open it. Not for any reason, until you hear me knock 3 times. Exactly 3. Do you understand?" "Yes," I breathed, my hand closing around the key. "Go! Now! Lila, be the leader!" I didn't hesitate. I turned, grabbed Mrs. Petrov's thin arm. "This way, everyone, with me." The ones who were invited quickly. I pushed the small, terrified group toward the swinging kitchen doors. I shoved the door open, expecting the relative safety of the kitchen. It was not safe. The heavy steel delivery door in the back was wide open. The rain and the dark alley silhouetted 2 figures. It was Kellen, and right behind him, the large, shadowed man whose snake tattoo I'd seen in the photograph. June was there, blocking their path. She had braced herself against the steel prep counter, her small body a furious, quivering barrier. "Get out of my way, June!" Kellen shrieked. His voice was a high-pitched, terrified whine. "They're here. They'll kill us all." "You did this!" June screamed back, her voice raw. "You traitorous rat, you brought them here." "He's not worth it, Kellen," the man with the snake tattoo growled. His voice was deep and guttural. Kellen saw me. He saw the terrified guests huddled behind me. His panic turned to rabid desperation. He pulled something from his belt, a long, thin boning knife from Maritza's magnetic strip. I said, "Move," he lunged. Not at June, but at me. June moved. She didn't scream. She didn't flinch. She grabbed the tool resting against the brick pizza oven, the heavy, long-handled steel peel used for raking hot coals. Kellen raised the knife, his eyes wild. June swung the heavy peel not as a weapon, but as a shield. She didn't aim for his head. She aimed for his hand. The sound was a sharp, metallic clang that echoed off the tile. The steel peel connected hard with Kellen's wrist. The knife flew from his numb fingers, skittering across the floor and disappearing under the dish pit. Kellen howled, a thin, pathetic sound, clutching his broken arm to his chest. The iron serpent shoved Kellen to the floor in disgust. Useless. He stepped into the kitchen, his eyes locking on me and the cluster of witnesses behind me. He took 1 step. He never got a second. Pino Sforza came through the swinging door from the dining room. He didn't rush. He arrived. The serpent was big, and he was fast. He saw Pino and launched a heavy, looping punch aimed at his head. Pino didn't block it. He moved inside it, in the pulsing red light. It was like watching a predator move. He flowed under the man's arm, his left hand catching the man's wrist, his right hand striking high, not a fist, his rigid, extended fingers, a knife hand strike, straight into the man's throat. The serpent made a wet, gagging sound. His punch went wide. His momentum was still carrying him forward, and Pino used it. He twisted the man's captured arm, locking the elbow at an angle it was never meant to bend. A sharp, dry snap cut through the air. The serpent screamed, a high, thin sound of pure agony. As his arm dislocated at the elbow, Pino didn't stop. He used the man's own weight, forcing him down to his knees, the useless arm held in a vice grip. He slammed the man's face, hard, into the stainless steel prep counter. The man went limp, conscious but broken, sobbing in pain. It was over in less than 3 seconds. Pino, not even breathing hard, looked at Maritza, who was holding a heavy sauté pan. "A tablecloth," he said, his voice calm, "one of the linen ones." Maritza ripped one from a prep table with a ruthless, detached efficiency. Pino tore the heavy fabric into strips. He bound the serpent's hands behind his back and then bound his ankles, trussing him like an animal, and secured him to the leg of the industrial stove. He looked at Kellen, who was whimpering on the floor. "The door," Pino commanded. Kellen, clutching his arm, scrambled to his feet and slammed the heavy steel delivery door shut, throwing the deadbolt. "Lila go," Pino yelled. I unfroze. "This way, this way." I pulled the terrified group past the bound serpent, past Kellen, and to the small, dark door that led to the basement. I fumbled with the key, my hands slick with sweat. The brass was slippery. "Hurry, Mrs." Petrov cried. I got the key in. The lock turned with a heavy thunk. I pulled the door open, revealing a black, narrow staircase. "I can't," one of the landlords whispered, his voice trembling. "It's dark. We'll fall." "No," I said. My voice was sharp. It didn't even sound like mine. "You will not!" I pulled my phone from my apron. The screen was cracked, but the light worked. I turned on the flashlight. The beam cut a bright, white hole in the darkness. "You will not fall," I repeated. "Hit Sal. Take a deep breath. Hold the shoulder of the person in front of you. Follow my light. I will lead." I held the phone up, its beam pointing down the stairs. I was the lighthouse. I led them down, one by one, into the cold, damp, musty-smelling wine cellar. I counted them. Mrs. Petrov, the two other landlords, the three reporters, the councilwoman, Maria Flores. 7. I got them all in, then stepped back and pulled the heavy door shut. I found the lock on the inside and turned the key. We were sealed in. The silence was total. We just stood there in the dark, breathing the cold air that smelled of dust and old wine. Then a new sound, a heavy, droning whir from somewhere deep in the walls. The single, bare bulb in the cellar ceiling flickered, buzzed, and then flooded the small room with a dim, yellow light, the backup generators. We heard footsteps above, heavy, running footsteps, shouting, new voices, official and loud. Knock, knock, knock. The signal. I unlocked the door and pulled it open. The kitchen was blindingly bright, and it was full of uniforms. They weren't Seattle PD. The patches on their arms were gold and blue, Pioneer Bay Port Authority Police. The committee's private force. They were armed, and they were in control. They were cuffing Kellen. They were cutting the serpent free, only to cuff him, too. Pino was standing with Councilwoman Flores, who must have come back up. "He's gone," Pino was saying. "What?" "Reed, he ran when the lights went out. He and Cross." I scanned the main dining room. The bar, the heavy oak bar, which had been a dark shadow, was now fully lit, and behind it, cowering among the shattered bottles, were two figures. "No, they're not," I shouted, pointing. "They're here behind the bar." Two port officers spun, their weapons drawn. "Hands, show us your hands now." Inspector Reed, his silver hair plastered to his sweating head, his expensive suit ruined, slowly raised his hands. He was finished. But Evan was a rat trapped in a cage. He didn't stand up. He scrambled, low to the ground. He bolted from behind the bar, not for the front door, not for the kitchen, but for the service hallway. The hallway that led to the secondary delivery exit. He was trying to escape. "He's running," a cop yelled. I didn't think, I just ran. I was faster. Years of running trays, years of running for the bus, years of running after Theo. I beat him to the hallway. I planted myself in the narrow passage, blocking his path. He skidded to a stop, his cheap loafers sliding on the tile. His face was a mask of pure, animal terror. "Lila, get out of my way. You don't understand. They'll kill me. The serpents, the NCC. Let me go, please." He tried to push me, to shove me aside. I stood firm. I didn't raise my hands. I didn't have to fight him. "You were doing it for us, Evan," I asked, my voice echoing in the narrow hall. "You were going to protect us." Yes, I promise now. Move." I pulled my phone from my apron. I had been recording ever since I left him on the patio, a lesson Kellen had inadvertently taught me: always protect yourself. I hit play. His own voice, slick and desperate, filled the hallway from the tiny speaker. "Nay, I was doing it for us. The inspection cycle. It isn't even real. It's next week. I pushed it up for us. I can control the list." Evan's face collapsed. The sound of his own confession, his own betrayal, broke him in a way a punch never could. The energy, the panic, the lies. It all just drained out of him. He slid down the wall, his head in his hands, and began to sob. The port officers rounded the corner and grabbed him. They hauled him to his feet, yanking his hands behind his back. They cuffed him and led him out, past me, past the kitchen, into the main room. They had Reed, too. Reed stopped as they passed Pino Sforza, who was calmly straightening his tie, his shirt sleeves still rolled up. Reed's face was a mottled, furious purple. He looked at Pino, his eyes burning with a hatred so pure it was terrifying. "You think you won," Reed spat, his voice a venomous whisper. "You stupid, arrogant bastard. You just declared war on a federal F** King agency. You are finished." Pino Sforza looked at the man who had tried to destroy my home. He adjusted his cufflink. "No, Inspector," Pino said, his voice dangerously soft. "I didn't go to war with the government. I went to war with the thieves who eat from the scraps of the working poor." He leaned in, his gaze like ice. "And I always win." The heavy thunk of the main breaker from the basement was followed by a buzz, and then the main chandeliers flared to life. The sudden, brilliant white light was a shock after the pulsing, infernal red. The restaurant was a war zone. Chairs were overturned. Inspector Reed's table was a mess of shattered glass and spilled red wine, a stark stain on the white linen. The Port Authority police were securing Kellen and the groaning, zip-tied iron serpent. Evan and Reed were already being marched out the front door, their faces pale and defeated. In the center of the room, the group from the wine cellar misses, Petrov, the landlords. The reporters were blinking, their eyes adjusting to the light. They looked at the departing police, then at the wreckage, and then they looked at us. Maritza, who had emerged from the kitchen still holding her heavy sauté pan. June, standing by the bar, her hand still resting on the heavy steel coal peel. And me, standing in the service hallway, my cracked phone still clutched in my hand. We were the ones who hadn't run. Mrs. Petrov, her face streaked with tears of terror and relief, looked at me. She raised her small, trembling hands, and she began to clap. It wasn't for Pino, and he was standing quietly by the wall, watching, his sleeves still rolled up. It wasn't for the police or the committee. It was for us. The union boss clapped, the ship owner clapped, the reporters, lowering their cameras, joined in, soon. All 36 tables, or at least the people who had been assigned to them, were filled with a rising, roaring applause. It wasn't the polite clap of satisfied diners. It was the raw, grateful applause of survivors. They were clapping for the cooks, for the barback, for the waitress. Councilwoman Maria Flores stepped onto one of the sturdy bar chairs, raising her hand for quiet. "Attention, everyone," she called out, her voice ringing with a new, sharp authority. "What you witnessed and endured tonight was the end of a long sickness in this city. As of this moment, the Pioneer Bay City Committee is assuming temporary oversight of all NCC operations, pending a full criminal investigation." A cheer went up from the landlords. "Furthermore," she continued, "the assets of Blue Bite Services and the Civic Integrity Fund are hereby frozen." She looked right at the reporters. "We will be opening a public hotline, effective at 8 a.m. tomorrow, for any resident or business owner seeking a full refund of fraudulent inspection fees." The room exploded. Mrs. Petrov was openly weeping, hugging one of the other landlords. The victory was real. It was total. A nervous, pale man I recognized as Mr. Davies, the bistro's actual owner, had been brought in by the police. He looked at the bound iron serpent, at the shattered wine bottles, and at the city committee members. He looked like he was about to faint. "Councilwoman," he stammered, I had no idea. We'll cooperate, of course. Anything." "Your cooperation is noted, Mr. Davies," she said curtly. "You might start by thanking your staff. They and Mr. Sforza just saved your business." "Mr." Davies looked at us. He saw Maritza, June, and me. He saw the reporters taking notes. He understood. "Yes, of course," he said, rushing forward. "Of course, Maritza, June, Lila. My God, you're all getting raises, full bonuses and insurance, full health insurance for everyone, starting immediately." June's jaw dropped. Insurance, that was the holy grail. Pino stepped forward then, moving out of the shadows. That's a good start. Mr. Davies. The owner flinched, clearly terrified of Pino. Mr. Sforza. Sir, I'll pay for the damages, all the wine, whatever you want. What I want, Pino said, is stability. He looked at me, then at June. A raise is temporary. Insurance is essential. But the future is paramount. He turned to the room, which had gone quiet again. I am announcing the creation of the Salt and Cedar Scholarship Fund. It will be an independent endowment managed by the Port Authority for the children of every employee who works in this restaurant. Full tuition, any college. The silence was deafening. He wasn't just fixing the night, he was fixing the future. The first enrollment, Pino said, his eyes finding mine, is reserved for Theo Moreno. I felt my knees go weak. June grabbed my arm to steady me. This was too much. It was a rescue I had never asked for. I waited until the committee members were processing the witnesses, until the owner was frantically cleaning, until the reporters were packing their gear. I found Pino by the front window, staring out at the rain, which had started to fall heavily again. "You can't do that," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He turned. "It's done." I can't accept that. It's charity. I don't want to be in your debt." The words came out sharper than I intended. I was a survivor, not a project. He didn't get angry. He didn't look offended. He just looked at me with that same unnerving calm. "It is not charity, Lila," he said, his voice soft. "It is a social contract. You buy insurance for a building in case of fire. This is insurance for the community that keeps the building standing. It's not a debt. It's an investment in people who have proven they are worth investing in." He stepped a fraction closer. "You earned this. Not just tonight, but every morning you got up at 5 a.m. to go to the laundromat. Every night you dealt with men like Kellen. You, June, Maritza, you earned this." I had no answer for that. It took 3 hours to clean the bistro. The police left, the committee left, the last of the reporters. After getting a final, grim statement from Maritza, finally packed up. One by one, the staff, exhausted, exhilarated, and clutching promises of health insurance, filtered out. Mr. Davies, looking 10 years older, locked the cash register and left. June was the last one. She stopped at the door, her coat on, her eyes flicking between me and Pino, who was standing by the bar. "You good?" she asked me. I nodded. "I'm good. June, go home." She grinned, a tired, knowing smile. "See you tomorrow, boss." The door clicked shut, the lock turned. We were alone. The bistro was silent, save for the hum of the coolers and the sound of the rain against the glass. The mess was gone, but the energy of the night remained. I didn't know what to do. I untied my apron, the perfect knot he had made hours ago, and folded it. "I should go," I said. "Theo's sitter." "She's fine," he said. "My service called her. You're covered for as long as you need." Of course he had. I walked to the stairs that led to the rooftop, needing the cold air one last time. I needed to wash the smell of dried wine and fear off me. I pushed the door open. He was right behind me. The rooftop was wet, the herb boxes dark and fragrant in the mist. The city lights were a soft, blurry glow below us. I walked to the railing. We stood there for a long time, not speaking. The silence wasn't awkward. It was necessary. "That kiss, earlier," I said finally, my voice small. "Was that part of the plan, too?" He turned to face me. The wind was whipping his hair. I have been called many things. Lila, a planner, a monster, a merchant, but I have never been called a liar. He stepped closer, into my space, just as he had before. It was not part of the plan. He was close enough for me to feel his warmth, close enough for the wind to stop. He looked at my mouth, then back to my eyes. He was waiting. This time, I was the one who moved. I was the one who closed the last 6 inches. I rose on my toes and I kissed him. It was not the hesitant, rain-slicked kiss from before. This was knowing. It was a release. All the terror, the exhaustion, the fight, the adrenaline. It all melted into this one, single point of contact. It was slow, and it was deep. It was a kiss that said, "We survived." My hands, which had once been so afraid, went to his chest, gripping his shirt. His hands, which had bound a man to a stove, found my back. They didn't grab, they didn't pull. They splayed flat against my spine, a solid, grounding pressure, holding me up, making me feel safe. I pressed closer, my body molding against his. My fear was gone, replaced by a raw, thrumming connection. I, who had been alone for so long, was pulling him closer. We broke for air but didn't part. I rested my forehead against his. Our breath mingled, ghosting white in the cold air. "This," I whispered, my eyes closed, "is moving too fast." "Then we will go slow," he whispered back, his voice a low rumble in his chest. "I'm still scared. I don't trust people like you." "Good." His lips brushed my temple. "Don't trust people like me. Trust me. I will earn it." His hands found mine, his fingers lacing with mine. "We will not rush," he said, his promise a warm breath against my skin. "But we will not hide either." A sharp whistle cut through the night. "Woo, get a room, parents, or at least an umbrella." We sprang apart. June was standing in the stairwell door, grinning, holding 2 bright yellow rain ponchos. "I forgot my keys," she said, her eyes dancing. "But seriously, it is Seattle after all." She tossed the ponchos at us. They landed on the wet concrete with a plap. "Don't want you catching a cold." The tension shattered. I laughed. It was a real, rusty, deep laugh. Pino, his hand still holding mine, was smiling. A genuine, unguarded smile. June gave us a little salute and disappeared back down the stairs. Pino looked at me, his smile fading, but the warmth remaining. "She's right," he said. He picked up one of the ponchos. The next evening, the 36 tables were full again, but this time, they were filled with Maritza's family, June's girlfriend, my son Theo, and the families of every busboy, dishwasher, and line cook. Pino had fulfilled his reservation. For the next 3 nights, the bistro was closed to the public, and the staff ate as his guests. It wasn't a buyout, it was a thank you. Late that night, long after the party, I tucked Theo into his bed. He was clutching a small, carved wooden fish Pino had given him. "Was work scary, Mommy?" he mumbled, half asleep. "It was, baby," I whispered, kissing his forehead. "But it's over." I went to my room, exhausted but whole. I picked up my phone to set the alarm for the laundromat, then paused. I didn't have to. I had insurance now. I recorded a short video message, the one I had been waiting 2 years to send. "Hey, Theo," I whispered, filming my own tired, smiling face. "Mommy's done. It was a long night, but I kept my promise. Tomorrow we're going to the aquarium." I was about to send it when I saw a message he'd recorded for me earlier that day. I played it. It was Theo, his face too close to the camera, holding up a drawing of a lopsided red fish. "Hi, Mommy, I hope you have a good day. I love you. You're my superhero." I sat on the edge of my bed, the phone in my hand, and I cried. They were the first tears I'd shed all night, and they were good. 3 weeks. In 3 weeks, the world changed. The Cascadia Ledger published its 72-page investigative report, and the bomb that Pino had built in the bistro went off in the heart of the city. It was all there. The money trail from Blue Bite, my poverty data spreadsheet showing Kellen's coordinated cancellations, the wireframe map from the USB drive, and the audio from my phone of Evan's patio confession. The fallout was a cascade. Deputy Director Alana Crest, the woman on the other end of Reed's panicked phone call, was indicted by a grand jury on charges of racketeering and conspiracy. Inspector Reed, facing overwhelming evidence, was arrested. His smug, arrogant face looking hollow and gray in his mug shot, Kellen Price, his arm in a sling, was being investigated as a primary accomplice, his entire life of petty theft and betrayal laid bare. And Evan Cross did what he always did. He folded. He pled guilty to lesser charges, agreeing to turn state's witness against everyone. He was a rat, and now he was a singing rat. The victory felt tangible. The Civic Integrity Fund was seized by the state. The city committee, making good on their promise, held a press conference. They didn't do it at City Hall. They did it at the Salt and Cedar Bistro, setting up their podium at table 18, right under the chandelier where Reed's spy camera had been. Councilwoman Flores announced the creation of the Sea Safe Fund, an emergency restitution fund to repay every single dollar extorted by the NCC. Mrs. Petrov, her hands shaking, was presented with the first reimbursement check. She cried. I cried. The whole kitchen staff cried. It was a perfect, clean victory for about 5 days. Then came the counterattack. Alana Crest's defense attorney was brilliant, and he was ruthless. He couldn't fight the facts, so he attacked the narrative. He went on every news station painting a new picture. This was not a citizen's investigation, he said, his voice smooth and deeply concerned. This was a corporate coup, a hostile takeover. The Veil Consortium, a private, shadowy entity run by Pino Sforza, created this crisis. They manipulated the media. They planted evidence, all to destabilize the port and seize control of the shipping lanes. He didn't save the port. He's trying to buy it. The story caught fire. The public, who had loved a savior, was terrified of a new king. The same people who had praised Pino as a hero now whispered that he was just a more dangerous shark. The narrative was muddied. The Veil Consortium was, after all, immensely powerful. Had he saved us, or had he just eliminated the competition? Pino's lawyers begged him to stay silent, to issue a statement, to let the storm pass. He ignored them. He didn't call a lawyer. He made a phone call to Mr. Davies. He booked all 36 tables at the Salt and Cedar Bistro, again. But this time, it was an open invitation. The bistro was chaos. It was brighter than it had been on the night of the event. Every news camera in Seattle was crammed into the back. The tables were filled. Mrs. Petrov was there, the union boss, the ship owners, the reporters from the Ledger, and at tables near the front, the rival reporters who had been dragging Pino's name through the mud. He had invited his accusers. Maritza, June, and I were there, not in uniform. We sat at a table near the front, with Theo. Pino Sforza stood in the middle of the room, no microphone, no podium. He wore a simple dark suit, no tie. He looked, as always, like a man who was simply, quietly, in control. They say I did this for control, he said. His voice was calm, but it filled the room, silencing the cameras. They say I want to own the port, that I manipulated this community to seize public assets. He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of the people he had saved and the people accusing him. This, he said, is what I want. He held up a single, bound document. This is the Open Harbor Covenant. It is a contract. It states that no private enterprise, including my own Veil Consortium, will ever bid on or profit from any public infrastructure contract in Pioneer Bay. Not now, not ever. A stunned silence. He was not grabbing power. He was giving it away. Furthermore, he continued, it states that any and all charitable donations from my organizations will be placed in a public trust to be supervised and distributed not by me, but by a community board, a board that includes, he nodded toward her, Mrs. Petrov. I stood up. I hadn't planned to. My heart was hammering. I need to say something. The cameras all swiveled to me. I felt the heat of the lights. I didn't care. The first night, mister, Sforza booked these 36 tables, I said, my voice shaking but clear. I thought he was a joke. I thought he was a rich man showing off his power. I was wrong. I looked at Mrs. Petrov, at June, at the faces in the crowd. He didn't book these tables to show us his power. He booked them to gather us. He knew that one of us, one voice, was just noise, a complaint, but 36 tables. I swept my hand across the room. 36 tables full of people. That is a movement. He gathered us. He brought us all together until we were too loud and too strong to be silenced. A reporter from the back, one of the hostile ones, raised his hand. "Miss Moreno, a personal question, if you will. It's rumored you are personally involved with Mr. Sforza. How can you stand there and endorse him? Aren't you afraid? Aren't you afraid of loving a man like that?" The room went silent. It was a cruel, loaded question. I felt Pino's eyes on me. I didn't look at him. I looked right at the reporter. I smiled. It wasn't the broken, tired smile of a waitress. It was the smile of a woman who had faced down her own ex-boyfriend in a hallway. "I have spent my entire life being afraid," I said, my voice ringing with a clarity that surprised me. I was afraid of my rent. I was afraid of my electricity bill. I was afraid of being laughed at. I was afraid of men like Evan Cross. I am more afraid of silence than I am of him. I finally turned and looked at Pino. He was watching me, his eyes filled with a raw intensity I had never seen. "Love isn't about power," I said, speaking to the room, but meaning it for him. "It's about speaking, and it's about being heard." He listens. Councilwoman Maria Flores stood up, pushing her chair back. "The city committee has reviewed Mr. Sforza's covenant, and on behalf of the people of Pioneer Bay, we accept." She needed a place to sign. There was no podium. June, with a flash of inspiration, grabbed one of the heavy, steel restaurant service carts and wheeled it into the center of the room with a flourish. Maritza, following her cue, came from the kitchen and placed a single, perfect sea salt apple tart on the cart's lower shelf. Maria Flores laid the Open Harbor Covenant on the top of the stainless steel cart. She took out a simple pen. In the packed, silent restaurant, the only sounds were the click of the pen and the faint, distant clinking of dishes from the kitchen. She signed her name. The sound of the pen tip gliding across the paper, that was the sound of the new order. A contract, signed not in a boardroom, but on a waitress's service cart, in the middle of a working-class bistro, surrounded by the people. The room exploded. The applause was deafening. Pino turned to me in the chaos, the noise fading away until it was just him. He smiled, a real, unguarded smile. "The 36 tables are just chairs. Lila," he said, his voice low, "just for me. The people are the home." I put my hand on his arm, my fingers closing over the fine wool of his suit. "Then from now on," I said, "we build this home together." The community's cameras panned back. They saw the whole room, 36 tables full. Workers from the port, their hands rough from labor. Cooks in their checkered pants, Mrs. Petrov, laughing, sharing a tart with the union boss. And at a small table near the front, my son, Theo, fast asleep across 2 chairs, his hand clutching the small, carved wooden fish. The knot of fear, of oppression, of being laughed at, it wasn't untied with violence. It was undone by a new set of rules, by a community that had finally been given the power to decide its own worth. Later, much, much later. The restaurant was dark and quiet. The cameras were gone. The families were home. The rain had returned, a soft Seattle mist that shrouded the streets in silver. We were on the rooftop. We stood by the railing, side by side, watching the city lights blur in the mist. The air was cold, alive with the smell of wet rosemary and the sea. Pino's hand found mine, his fingers laced with mine, his skin warm against my cold hands. He drew me closer, and I leaned my head against his shoulder. We stood in silence, breathing the same cold air. He turned, his hand moving to my cheek, his thumb grazing my skin. He kissed me. It was not the hesitant, curious kiss in the rain. It was not the desperate, adrenaline-fueled kiss on the night of the fight. It was deep, and it was gentle. It held no questions, only answers. It was not a kiss of victory. It was the kiss of a beginning. We stayed there, his arms around me, my hands on his chest, a single, steady warmth against the night. Below us, the neon sign of the Salt and Cedar, repaired and glowing, switched on, its warm, bright light pushed back against the dark. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We'd love to know where you're listening from, so please comment below and share your thoughts. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and give this video a like. And to help this story reach even more people, please support us by hitting that hype button.